Welcome to Screen With Me with award-winning author D.W. Sauer. The content discussed in this story you're about to hear discusses potentially sensitive topics that include, but are not limited to, physical and substance abuse, addictions, paranormal and supernatural, extraterrestrial, mythological, and graphic violence that may be triggers to some. The goal of this podcast is to entertain and not cause harm. The author does not intend to undermine the struggles of people who have suffered or been a victim. Please stop listening when any parts of the story become too much. All episodes of Screen With Me are copyrighted by the author and can be purchased in print. All rights are reserved to author D.W. Sauer, and no parts of this production may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form by means of electronical, mechanical, transcribed, photocopied, screenshotted, recorded, sample, or other forms of reproduction without the written permission of author D.W. Sauer. The following story you're about to hear is a work of fiction. Some Screen With Me stories are inspired by local and national folklore. However, the characters and events are fictitious with the exception of verifiable historical events and locations. All incidences, descriptions, dialogue, and opinions are expressed products of the author's imagination and not to be construed as real. The Peyton Randolph House. Welcome to Colonial Williamsburg, the tour guide announced. You may have heard that seeing is believing, but here one must believe to see. I believe you're crazy if you believe in this nonsense, Jackson whispered to his sister. Shh. Julia replied, "This is going to be great." He rolled his eyes and began to follow his parents as the guide mumbled on. If one is lucky while taking a late-night stroll, they may see shadows dancing past the window or quickly moving away like a child trying not to get caught looking outside. Sometimes one can see the dim yellow lights traveling up a staircase like a candle guiding one to bed. Is it any of the houses, or are there specific ones? Robert, Jackson's dad, asked. Embarrassed, Jackson slowed his pace and hunched his head, trying to make himself as small as he could. Good question, the guy stated. These events can be seen in many of the homes and buildings around here, but the most disturbing activity happens here. The guide spread his arms wide, and behind him was a reddish-brown two-story building with 13 windows going from end to end. There were enough windows to see much of the inside, but peering in led Jackson to wonder who or what was looking back. Jackson was skeptical of this whole ghost walk from the start, but this house suddenly made him a believer. A cold chill ran down Jackson's neck, causing him to shake. There was no sign of anyone in the building, but something felt wrong. Felt as though he was being watched. A sudden nudge on his arm woke him from his trance. He looked over to see Julia's elbow retreating to her side. She pointed toward the guide like a teacher wanting him to pay attention. Welcome to the Peyton Randolph House. Built in 1715, the home grew over the years. And even by today's standards, it's a sizable estate. But the larger the home, the greater the tragedy. The guide grinned like a jack-o'-lantern, staring daggers through Jackson. There are claims that this house is the most haunted place in the United States, which may be true, but only you can decide if that's the case. The chill was still with Jackson, and he no longer wanted to go inside, but the tour was moving on. He quickly scurried in line between his parents and his sister. Jackson's family was behind the other two families in the group, which meant they were the last to enter. Good. If there is something in there, it will get the others first, Jackson thought. As Jackson crossed the threshold, he felt two hands rest on his shoulder, as if someone was trying to remove his jacket. Thinking it was his sister, Jackson quickly jerked his arm back, but he didn't hit his sister, just air. He turned to see she was a few steps outside of the house looking at her phone. Did you do that? Jackson asked. Do what? Julia snapped. She then stepped forward, brushed back Jackson, and entered the house. A bad feeling overcame Jackson and his stomach began to knot. He took one more step in the house and a force, like that of the hand, hit him in the chest. Jackson stumbled backward, causing a commotion of thuds from his feet pounding on the floor and his hands slapping at the door frame. Regaining his footing and standing just outside the door, Jackson said, "I don't think I'm wanted here." Robert rushed over Jackson, and though he pleaded with his father not to go in, Jackson was forced to continue the tour. With each step in the house, Jackson felt sicker and sicker, He looked pale, and the fright on his face was noticeable, even to Julia. This place. What's wrong? Julia asked. This place. There's something here. It pushed me out the door, and I got this weird knot in my stomach. Oh, thank God. I thought it was just me. This place gives me the creeps too. Julia grabbed Jackson's hand. Come on, stay close to me. Jackson didn't argue and immediately latched onto his sister. I will warn you all that we're about to go upstairs to the second floor, and I urge you to keep one hand on the railing at all times. Guests tend to experience a bit of vertigo when they let go of the railing and tend to become off balance. Julia and Jackson were the last to ascend the stairs. They held onto the rail with their right arm, and Julia's left trailed behind her, holding Jackson's hand. All was well as they made it into the first turn. They made it 3 more steps when Julia's jacket pocket began to buzz. Removing her hand from the railing, she reached into the pocket to see the incoming text. The light on the home screen flickered like it was shorting out. Julia looked up, and a young girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, wearing a white dress, smiled and lunged at her. The cold hands hit her chest, and Julia started to fall backward. Jackson held up his hands and prevented Julia from falling. "Julia!" their mother yelled. Their parents rushed down the stairs, and when Julia told them what happened, they blamed it on her letting go of the rail, not because of a vengeful spirit. They helped Julia up the stairs, and the tour continued. With each room, Julia and Jackson saw shadows of 2 children following them. They heard the creaking of the floorboards from rooms where no one was in them. But thankfully, Jackson and Julia only saw and heard things for the remainder of the tour. The tour was coming to an end, and they exited the house with no one else experiencing an encounter. Before they moved on to their next stop, the tour guide gathered the group around so they could take pictures one last time. Everyone pulled out their phones and began snapping away. Everyone except Julia and Jackson. They were frozen in place, staring at the window just right of the front door. A hooded figure rests behind the pane of glass. One could only see the shoulders and the hood surrounding the head and face. The face. It lacked all discernible features. In fact, it was almost like a skeleton. But its eyes were as black as night, blacker than the hood surrounding the white bone cheeks. Just when Julia and Jackson thought that they were the only ones seeing the ghost, a woman screamed, "He's in the window. I told you we weren't alone." Thank you for listening to Scream With Me, and stay tuned for the next episode. Until then, you can stay up to date with following me on Instagram at DWSour. More information, including how to purchase my books, can be found at dwsour.com,